The morning of my father's funeral started with a text message I should have expected: dress appropriately. This is a dignified event for people who mattered to Robert. Vanessa. I stared at the message while sitting in my modest Toyota in the parking lot of Riverside Memorial Chapel. Through the windshield, I could see luxury cars arriving: Mercedes, BMWs, a Bentley that definitely belonged to my half-brother Marcus. The same Marcus who'd told me 3 months ago that Dad's illness was handled by the real family now. My father, Robert Davis, had died 6 days ago. I'd learned about it from his obituary in the newspaper, not from a phone call. The obituary listed his beloved wife Vanessa and cherished children Marcus and Victoria. My name appeared in small print at the bottom. Also survived by daughter Emily from a previous marriage. Also survived by, like I was an afterthought. A footnote. I looked down at my black dress. Simple, clean, purchased from a department store, not designer, not expensive. Exactly what Vanessa would use as ammunition. The file folder sat on my passenger seat. Inside were documents I'd prepared carefully over the past week. I picked it up, feeling its weight. Everything I needed was in there. I got out of the car and walked toward the chapel entrance. The building was beautiful. Classic Victorian architecture with modern updates, stained glass windows, perfectly manicured gardens. I'd bought it 14 months ago, through my holding company, Lighthouse Properties LLC. The previous owners, the Morrison family, had run it for 60 years before retiring to Florida. They'd been grateful to sell to someone who appreciated its history. Vanessa had no idea she was planning my father's funeral in my building. At the entrance, I recognized the security guard, Paul Henderson, who worked for the private security firm contracted with the funeral home. He looked uncomfortable. "Miss Davis," he said quietly, "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you, Paul." He shifted his weight. I received some instructions this morning, from Mrs. Vanessa Davis. I'm aware." Inside I could hear voices. The service didn't start for another 20 minutes, but the family had arrived early. I heard Vanessa's distinctive laugh, high, practiced, the sound she made when she wanted to project confidence. I walked through the doors. The chapel's main room was stunning, with dark wood pews and soft lighting. About 40 people were already seated, mostly my father's business associates and Vanessa's friends. At the front near the closed casket, stood Vanessa in an elegant black Chanel suit. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. She looked like she was attending a fashion event, not a funeral. Next to her stood Marcus, 32, in an expensive Italian suit. He worked at Dad's investment firm, though his actual contributions were questionable. Victoria, 28, whispered to her husband Bradley near the second row. She ran a lifestyle blog that Vanessa funded. I walked down the center aisle and took a seat in the fifth row, left side. Conversations stopped. Vanessa turned, saw me, and her expression hardened. She walked down the aisle, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "What are you doing here?" she said, her voice low, but carrying in the quiet room. "Attending my father's funeral. This is a private service for people who were actually part of Robert's life." She looked me up and down. "For people who contributed to this family." I stayed seated, folder in my lap. Marcus joined her, standing with his arms crossed. "You haven't been part of this family in years, Emily. Dad made that clear." "Did he?" "He stopped returning your calls," Victoria added, walking over with Bradley. "That should have told you something." The truth was more complicated. Dad had stopped returning my calls after his cancer diagnosis, because Vanessa controlled his phone. I'd tried to visit, but was told he needed rest and family only. I'd sent letters that were returned unopened. I'd hired a lawyer to get information about his condition, but Vanessa had Dad's medical power of attorney. "This funeral is for people who respected Robert," Vanessa continued. "People who contributed financially and emotionally, not people who walked away and only showed up when there might be something to inherit." Several of Dad's colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked at me with pity, others with judgment. "I'm here to pay my respects to my father," I said calmly. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "You can't even afford to be here, Emily. This service costs $40,000. The burial plot, the flowers, the reception. Everything is being handled by people who actually cared about Robert. You show up in a discount dress, driving that embarrassing car, expecting what? Sympathy." Paul Henderson appeared near the back of the room, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "This funeral is for real family who contributed," Vanessa announced, her voice rising so everyone could hear. "People who were there during Robert's final months. People who paid for his medical care. who sat with him, who made difficult decisions, not someone who abandoned him, and shows up expecting to be treated like she matters. Marcus nodded. Mom's right, this isn't appropriate, you need to leave, Victoria said, quietly. Don't make a scene. I remained seated, folder still in my lap, hands folded on top of it. Vanessa gestured to Paul. Security, please escort this woman out. She's disrupting a private family event. Paul looked at me, then at Vanessa, clearly caught between his orders and something else. He didn't move. Now, Vanessa demanded. Before Paul could respond, the side door opened. Richard Morrison walked in, the funeral director, 73 years old, who I'd asked to stay on after purchasing the property. He'd been relieved to continue his life's work without the stress of ownership. Behind him was Thomas Brennan, attorney at law, carrying a briefcase. Mrs. Davis, Richard said gently, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Vanessa turned to him, irritated. There's no misunderstanding. I'm hosting my husband's funeral at your establishment. I've paid your fees. This woman is trespassing. Thomas Brennan stepped forward. He was 60, with gray hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd handled difficult situations for decades. I'd retained him specifically for this moment. Mrs. Davis, he said, I'm Thomas Brennan, attorney for Lighthouse Properties LLC. I need to inform you of some important facts before you proceed. What are you talking about? Marcus demanded. Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. Lighthouse Properties LLC purchased Riverside Memorial Chapel 14 months ago from the Morrison family. The current owner and CEO of Lighthouse Properties is Miss Emily Davis. The room went silent. Vanessa stared. What? Miss Emily Davis owns this funeral home, Thomas repeated clearly. She has owned it since March of last year. You are currently planning and hosting a funeral service at her property. That's impossible, Victoria said. Emily doesn't have money for something like this. Thomas pulled out the deed, property transfer records, and business registration documents. He handed them to Vanessa. She looked at the papers, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning horror. The signature at the bottom of the purchase agreement was mine. The business registration clearly listed me as owner and CEO. This has to be fake, Marcus said, grabbing the documents from his mother. Emily works as a bookkeeper. She lives in a tiny apartment. She drives a 15-year-old car. Miss Davis is a certified public accountant who owns a successful consulting firm, Thomas said. She also owns Lighthouse Properties, which holds commercial real estate valued at approximately $42 million. Riverside Memorial Chapel is one of 7 properties in her portfolio. I finally stood, folder in hand. Vanessa looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. You own this place? Yes. Since when? March 19th of last year. The Morrison family wanted to retire. I made them a fair offer. But how? Victoria looked genuinely confused. You don't have money. I'd heard this assumption my entire adult life. After my mother died when I was 16, I'd lived with Dad and Vanessa for 2 miserable years before leaving for college. I'd worked multiple jobs, earned a full scholarship, and put myself through school while Vanessa told everyone I was struggling and barely making it. The truth was different. I'd discovered early that I had a talent for numbers. I'd started doing bookkeeping for small businesses in college, then accounting, then financial consulting. I'd saved aggressively, invested wisely, and built a client base that valued discretion and expertise over flash. By 25, I owned my first commercial property, a small office building I'd purchased during the recession. By 30, I had 4 properties, and a consulting firm with 8 employees. Now, at 33, my portfolio was worth $42 million. I'd never told Dad. After Vanessa entered his life, our relationship had become strained. She'd positioned herself as the sophisticated woman who understood his world, while painting me as the awkward daughter who couldn't cope with her mother's death. Over time, Dad had started to believe her narrative. How did you afford this? Marcus asked, his voice sharp with accusation. I built a business, I said simply. Over 15 years. Doing what? Financial consulting, property management, investment advising. I looked at him directly. Real work. His face flushed red. Thomas cleared his throat. I should also inform you, Mrs. Davis, that you owe the funeral home $40,000 for services rendered. Miss Davis has generously allowed this funeral to proceed on your promised payment. However, Given that you just attempted to have the property owner forcibly removed from her own building, she would be within her rights to cancel the service immediately. The blood drained from Vanessa's face. Cancel? But, people are already here. Robert's body is in my facility, I finished. In my chapel. With flowers I agreed to provide, in a casket you selected from my inventory, for a service you scheduled in my building. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Several of Dad's colleagues were watching with expressions ranging from shock to barely suppressed fascination. You can't do this, Vanessa said, but her voice wavered. Robert's funeral is in 30 minutes. I'm aware. Emily, please. For the first time, she looked uncertain. These people, Robert's friends and colleagues, they came to pay their respects. I looked at the casket holding my father's body. The man who'd raised me, taught me to ride a bike, helped me with math homework. The man who'd also slowly drifted away after marrying Vanessa, who'd stopped taking my calls in his final months, who'd apparently never questioned why his daughter abandoned him. The funeral will proceed as scheduled, I said quietly. Vanessa's shoulders sagged with relief. However, I continued, there will be some changes. Thomas handed me another document from his briefcase. I unfolded it. This is the seating chart you provided to Richard, I said. It lists family in the front 2 rows. I notice my name isn't included. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. I'll be sitting in the front row, I said, as Robert Davis's daughter. If that's a problem, the service can be relocated to another facility. There are 3 other funeral homes in town. I'm sure one of them has availability, though not on 30 minutes notice. Fine, Vanessa said through gritted teeth. Sit wherever you want. I also see that I'm not listed among the speakers. Marcus stepped forward. The speaking order was carefully planned. We have Dad's business partner, Mom's eulogy, my remarks, and Victoria's poem. Add me to the list. There's no time. There's time, I said. I'll speak after you, Marcus. Before Victoria's poem. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Thomas's presence and the reality of the situation stopped him. Additionally, I continued, the reception was planned for the Riverside Country Club. I understand you've arranged catering and booked the main ballroom. Yes, Vanessa said cautiously. I'm a member of the Riverside Country Club Board of Directors. I joined 2 years ago. I called the club this morning and explained the situation. They've agreed to honor your reservation, but you'll need to provide payment in full before the event begins. The club has canceled the line of credit you requested in Robert's name, since his estate is currently in probate. Victoria gasped. You're going to embarrass us at Dad's own funeral reception. I'm ensuring proper payment for services rendered. The country club isn't a charity, neither is my funeral home. This is cruel, Vanessa said, and I almost laughed at the irony. What's cruel, I said quietly, is telling a daughter she can't afford to attend her own father's funeral. What's cruel is blocking someone from visiting their dying father because they're not real family. What's cruel is erasing someone from an obituary. The room was absolutely silent. The funeral will proceed, I repeated. You'll pay your bills. You'll treat me with basic human dignity. And then, Mrs. Davis, you and I will have a conversation about my father's estate. The estate is settled, Marcus said quickly. Dad's will was clear. Everything goes to Mom, with provisions for Victoria and me. I opened my folder and pulled out a document. This is a copy of a will dated 6 months before Dad died. It was written before his cancer diagnosis, filed with his attorney Gerald Hutchinson. It names me as executor and divides assets differently than the will Vanessa produced last week. Vanessa's face went white. That will is outdated. Robert updated it, during his illness, while on heavy medication, while you had power of attorney, and controlled who could visit him. I looked at Thomas. Which will has legal standing is a matter for probate court. Gerald Hutchinson himself walked in at that moment, summoned by Thomas at my request. At 78, he'd been Dad's attorney for 40 years. Gerald, Vanessa looked panicked. What are you doing here? Miss Davis asked me to attend, he said calmly. Robert did indeed create a new will 6 months before his diagnosis. He was of sound mind, under no duress, and the document is properly witnessed and notarized. I informed you of this will's existence last week, Vanessa. You chose to proceed with probate, using a different document. Robert changed his mind, she insisted. Perhaps, that's for the court to determine. Gerald looked at me with something like approval. In the meantime, Emily is contesting the current probate proceedings. The court has frozen the estate pending investigation. Marcus looked furious. You're holding up Dad's estate over money? I'm ensuring Dad's actual wishes are honored, not the wishes of someone who isolated him from his daughter during his final months. Vanessa's carefully composed expression finally cracked. He didn't want to see you. He told me that, did he? Or did you tell him I didn't want to see him? I pulled out another document from my folder. These are copies of 17 letters I sent to Dad over the last 2 years, letters that were returned unopened. I have the envelopes with the return to sender stamps. That's your handwriting on them, Vanessa, not Dad's. She stared at the letters. I also have phone records showing 43 attempted calls to Dad's cell phone, all going to voicemail. I have emails sent to his personal account that bounced back with an inbox full error. I hired a private investigator, who documented my attempts to visit the house, only to be turned away by staff who said you'd given orders. Robert was sick, Vanessa said weakly. He needed rest. He needed his daughter. My voice cracked slightly, the first emotion I'd shown, and you made sure that didn't happen. The guests were watching this like a drama unfolding. Some looked sympathetic, others uncomfortable. A few were clearly reevaluating everything they thought they knew about the Davis family dynamics. Richard Morrison spoke gently. The service should begin soon. Perhaps this discussion could continue afterward. I nodded, composing myself. Agreed. Vanessa looked around the room, seeming to realize that dozens of witnesses had just heard everything. Her social standing, carefully cultivated over 15 years of marriage to Robert Davis, was crumbling. We'll discuss this later, she said, trying to regain control, privately. We'll discuss it with attorneys present, I corrected, and with full transparency, Thomas added. Miss Davis has also filed a request for a full forensic accounting of Robert Davis's finances during his illness. The court has approved this request. We'll be examining all transactions, all medical expenses, and all estate planning activities that occurred while Mr. Davis was incapacitated. Victoria grabbed her mother's arm. Mom, what is he talking about? Vanessa didn't answer. The service begins in 15 minutes, Richard said. I suggest everyone take their seats. People began moving toward the pews. The atmosphere had completely changed. What was supposed to be a dignified funeral for a respected businessman had become something else entirely. I walked to the front row and sat down. After a moment's hesitation, Vanessa, Marcus, and Victoria took their seats as well, several feet away from me. The physical distance spoke volumes. The service proceeded. Dad's business partner, Michael, gave a touching eulogy about their 40-year friendship. He mentioned how proud Robert had been of his children, plural, and looked directly at me when he said it. Vanessa's face tightened. When it was Vanessa's turn, she walked to the podium and delivered a prepared speech about their 15 years together. It was polished, practiced, and completely devoid of genuine emotion. She talked about their travels, their social circle, their charitable work. She didn't mention my father's first marriage or his first daughter. Marcus spoke next, describing Dad as a mentor and role model. He talked about learning the business, about Dad's wisdom, about carrying on his legacy. It was clear he saw himself as the heir to everything Robert Davis had built. Then it was my turn. I stood and walked to the podium. My hands shook slightly as I placed my notes on the wooden surface. The chapel was completely silent. My father taught me to ride a bike when I was 6, I began. He ran beside me, holding the seat, promising not to let go. Eventually he did let go, but he was still running behind me, ready to catch me if I fell. That's the Robert Davis I knew, someone who let you find your own balance but never really left you alone. I saw a few people dabbing their eyes. He taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 12. He said understanding money was understanding freedom. He showed me that numbers tell stories, that budgets reveal priorities, that financial independence was the foundation of every other kind of independence. Everything I've accomplished professionally started with those lessons. Vanessa was staring at her hands. When my mother died, Dad held our family together. He was grieving too, but he made sure I knew I wasn't alone. We had dinner together every night. He helped me with homework. He went to every school event, every concert, every parent-teacher conference. He was present. My voice strengthened. Over the years, distance grew between us. Life got complicated, relationships changed, but I never stopped being his daughter. and he never stopped being my father. Whatever happened in recent years, whatever misunderstandings occurred, whatever people may have told him about me, none of that changes the fact that Robert Davis was my dad, and I loved him. I looked at the casket. I'm sorry I wasn't there at the end, Dad. I tried. I want you to know that I tried. I returned to my seat. The silence was profound. Victoria's poem was brief, and felt hollow after what I'd said. When she finished, Richard led us through the final moments of the service. Then pallbearers, Dad's business associates, carried the casket to the hearse. At the cemetery, the burial was quick. Cold November wind whipped through the bare trees as the casket was lowered into the ground. I threw a single rose onto the casket, watching it rest against the polished wood. Vanessa stood apart from me, surrounded by Marcus and Victoria. She looked older somehow, the confident woman from the chapel replaced by someone who understood that her carefully constructed world was falling apart. After the burial, most guests proceeded to the country club reception. I stayed at the cemetery for a few extra minutes, standing by the grave. Miss Davis, Thomas approached quietly. The reception. I'm not attending. Are you sure? You have every right. I know, but I said goodbye. That's what I came for. He nodded, understanding. We walked to the parking lot. Richard Morrison was waiting by his car. Emily, he said, what you did today took courage. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing. He hesitated. Your father would have been proud. The man I remember, before the illness, before everything, that Robert Davis would have been proud of the woman you've become. My eyes burned with tears I'd been holding back all day. Thank you, Richard. He patted my shoulder gently, and walked to his car. Thomas and I stood in the parking lot, as cars departed for the reception. What happens now? I asked. The probate court will schedule hearings. The forensic accountant will examine the estate. Based on what we've already uncovered, I believe we have a strong case that the second will was executed under undue influence. Your father was heavily medicated, isolated from other family, and completely dependent on Vanessa for information and care. What did the accountant find? Thomas's expression darkened. Significant transfers from your father's accounts to accounts controlled solely by Vanessa. Over $2 million moved in the final 6 months of his life. Property transfers, stock sales, cash withdrawals, all perfectly legal if Robert authorized them. But the timing and amounts raise questions. She was stealing from him. That's one interpretation. She would argue she was managing medical expenses and household finances with his full knowledge and consent. But the pattern is concerning. I thought about my father, sick and confused, trusting the woman he'd married to handle everything. Had he known what was happening? Had he approved these transfers, or had Vanessa simply acted on her power of attorney? There's something else, Thomas said. The house you grew up in, the one Robert bought with your mother before you were born. Vanessa transferred it to her name only 6 weeks ago. Robert signed the deed, but the witnesses were Vanessa's sister and her hairdresser. The signature looks shaky at best. My childhood home, the place where Mom had planted roses in the garden, where I'd had birthday parties, where Dad had taught me to ride that bike. Vanessa had taken it. Can we get it back? Possibly. The transfer occurred when Robert was clearly incapacitated. We can argue it was fraudulent, but Emily, he looked at me seriously, this is going to get ugly. Vanessa will fight back. Marcus and Victoria will be hostile. There will be depositions, court hearings, possibly media attention. Robert Davis was a prominent businessman. This won't be quiet. I understand. Are you sure you want to proceed? Because there's another option. We could negotiate a settlement. Vanessa keeps some assets. You keep some. Everyone walks away and moves on with their lives. I thought about it. The easy path. The path that avoided conflict. Then I thought about those 17 returned letters. The blocked phone calls. The months of being told my father didn't want to see me. The obituary that erased me. The funeral where I'd been called a trespasser in my own building. No settlement, I said. We proceed. Thomas smiled slightly. I thought you'd say that. 3 months later, I sat in a conference room with Thomas, Gerald Hutchinson, Vanessa's attorney, and the forensic accountant. We'd just finished presenting our findings to the probate court judge. The evidence was damning. The accountant had traced systematic asset stripping from my father's accounts. The handwriting expert had testified that several signatures on financial documents appeared to be forged or signed under duress. Medical records showed Dad's cognitive decline was severe during the period when major financial decisions were supposedly being made. Most damning was a recording I hadn't known existed. Dad's nurse, Maria, had kept a personal audio diary during his final months. She'd been disturbed by Vanessa's behavior and wanted documentation in case questions arose later. On the recording, you could hear Vanessa telling Dad that I'd called and said I didn't want to visit, that I was too busy with my own life. You could hear Dad's weak voice asking why I'd abandoned him. It broke my heart to hear it. It also proved that Vanessa had deliberately isolated him. The judge ruled in my favor. The second will was deemed invalid. The first will, the one naming me as executor and dividing assets more equitably, was reinstated. Vanessa was ordered to return improperly transferred assets. The house went back into the estate. Vanessa lost everything except her personal possessions and a modest trust fund Dad had established early in their marriage. Marcus and Victoria received their intended inheritances, but nothing more. The bulk of Dad's estate, including his business shares and personal property, came to me. I sold the business shares to Dad's partner Michael, who'd run the company anyway. I kept the house and had it restored to how it looked when Mom was alive. I turned it into a counseling center for children who'd lost parents, a way to honor both my mother and father. The Riverside Memorial Chapel continued operating under Richard's management. I kept it as part of my portfolio, knowing Dad would have appreciated the irony. Vanessa moved to Arizona to live near her sister. We never spoke again. Marcus sent me an angry email calling me vindictive, which I deleted without responding. Victoria, surprisingly, sent a brief apology 6 months later, saying she hadn't known the full story. I appreciated it but didn't pursue a relationship. The money didn't matter much to me. I'd already built my own wealth. What mattered was the truth coming out. What mattered was my father's real wishes being honored. What mattered was people knowing that I hadn't abandoned him. I'd been kept away. On the first anniversary of Dad's death, I visited his grave. I brought roses, the same kind Mom used to grow. I fought for you, Dad, I said to the headstone. I made sure the truth came out. I hope that's what you would have wanted. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a child laughing. I stayed there for an hour, just sitting on the grass beside his grave, feeling at peace for the first time since his diagnosis. I'd done what needed to be done. I'd stood up for myself and for his memory. And I'd done it in the funeral home I owned, in front of everyone who thought I was too poor, too insignificant, too not family to matter. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well, building something real, and being ready when people underestimate you. I stood up, brushed grass from my jeans, and walked back to my car. The same old Toyota I'd driven to the funeral. I'd bought a Mercedes last year but preferred the Toyota. It reminded me of where I'd come from and what I'd built. As I drove away from the cemetery, I called Richard. "How's the Morrison family doing in Florida?" I asked. "Loving retirement. They sent a postcard last week, said selling to you was the best decision they ever made." "Good. I'm glad." I paused. "Richard, I want to start a program at the funeral home. Subsidized services for families who can't afford proper funerals. A fund to help people say goodbye with dignity." "That's a wonderful idea, Emily. Robert would have loved that." "Yeah," I said softly. "I think he would have." I hung up and continued driving, back toward the life I'd built, the business I'd created, the properties I'd acquired, the future I'd made for myself. I'd been told I couldn't afford to be at my father's funeral. Turned out, I'd owned the whole building. I pulled my Jeep to the side of Ocean View Drive and watched my Uncle Dennis carry boxes into my beach house. Behind him, a blonde woman in her 30s, definitely not my Aunt Patricia, laughed as she directed him where to place furniture. The house sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, weathered cedar shingles catching the afternoon sun. My parents had bought it in 1998 for $340,000. They'd planned to retire there. Instead, they died in a car accident when I was 8, and the house went into a trust managed by Uncle Dennis. I'd bought it back from the trust 2 years ago for $2.8 million. Market value was now $4.7 million. Uncle Dennis had no idea. I watched him struggle with a leather couch through the front door. The blonde, his girlfriend, apparently was on her phone, probably posting about her new beach house on social media. She wore expensive athleisure wear, and carried a designer purse I recognized from a boutique in town that sold items starting at $3,000. My phone buzzed. A text from my cousin Jordan, Dennis and Patricia's son. Mom said Dad's staying at the old beach place for a while. You know anything about that? I'd known Jordan since we were kids. He was 30 now, working as a teacher in Portland, and had always been decent to me. Unlike his parents, he'd never treated me like a charity case. I'm looking at it right now, I texted back. He's moving his girlfriend in. 3 dots appeared immediately, then WTF. Does Mom know? She helped him get the keys. Jesus. I'm sorry, Maya. This is messed up even for Dad. I put my phone away and got out of the Jeep. Time to handle this. Uncle Dennis saw me approaching, and his expression shifted from concentration to defensive annoyance in seconds. Maya, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. The blonde woman walked out onto the porch, assessing me with the kind of look women give each other when measuring competition. I was in jeans and a Stanford hoodie, hair pulled back, no makeup. She was clearly dressed to impress. Dennis, who's this? She asked. My niece, Maya, this is Amber. Amber's smile was bright and fake. Oh, you're the niece. Dennis has told me so much about you. How sweet that you stopped by to visit. I looked at the furniture being moved in. Visit isn't exactly what's happening here. Dennis set down a box and wiped his forehead. Maya, I was going to call you about this. Patricia and I decided I should use the beach house for a while. Things have been tense at home. I need space to clear my head. Space to clear your head. With Amber. His jaw tightened. My personal life is my business. Your personal life stops being your business when it involves my property. Amber laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. Your property, sweetie. This is Dennis's family beach house. He's been managing it for years. Managing it, I said slowly. Interesting word choice. Dennis stepped between us. Maya, look, I raised you after your parents died. Patricia and I took you in, fed you, clothed you, paid for your school supplies. We didn't have to do that. We chose to because you were family. Here it was, the argument I'd heard variations of my entire life. You got a college education, he continued. You have a good job now. You're doing fine. Meanwhile, Patricia and I are still working, still struggling with bills, still dealing with stress. I think it's reasonable for me to use the family beach house for a few months. Consider it payment for raising you. The audacity took my breath away. Not because I hadn't expected it. Uncle Dennis had always believed the world owed him, but because he genuinely seemed to think this logic made sense. Payment, I repeated. Yes, we sacrificed a lot for you, Maya. Time, money, energy. This house has been sitting empty most of the year anyway. I'm just putting it to use. Amber nodded supportively. Dennis told me how hard it was to raise someone else's child. You should be grateful he's not asking for more. A car pulled up behind my Jeep. Aunt Patricia's Honda. She got out, saw me, and her expression became guarded. Maya, I thought you might show up. You gave him keys to my house. Patricia walked up the driveway, carrying 2 bags of groceries. It's not your house, sweetie. It's the family house. Your parents left it in trust for everyone. Dennis has just as much right to use it as anyone. The trust dissolved when I bought the property. She looked confused for a moment, then dismissive. You didn't buy anything. You can't afford a house like this. You work as a software developer. What do you make, 70, 80,000 a year? Something like that, I said, which was technically true. My salary from the tech company was $85,000. She didn't know about my equity compensation, my stock options that had vested over 6 years, or the $4.2 million I'd made when the company went public 18 months ago. So there you go, Patricia said, as if that settled it. This house is worth at least $2 million. You couldn't possibly afford it. Dennis nodded. The trust still owns it, which means as trustee, I have authority to make decisions about its use. And I've decided to use it. The trust dissolved 26 months ago, when I purchased the property for $2.8 million. I said clearly. I have the deed, the title insurance, and the property tax records to prove it. You're currently moving your girlfriend into my house without permission. The silence was profound. Amber looked at Dennis. You said this was your family's beach house. It is, he insisted, but doubt flickered across his face. Maya, if you somehow scrape together money for a down payment, that doesn't mean not a down payment, full purchase. Cash. From the trust that you managed. I pulled out my phone and showed him the property record from the county assessor's website. Owner, Maya Christine Anderson. Purchase date November 2023. Purchase price $2,800,000. Patricia snatched the phone from my hand, staring at the screen. This can't be real. Where would you get that kind of money? My job. Software developers don't make millions. Senior engineers at successful startups do, especially when they join early and the company goes public. I took my phone back. I joined Nextech in 2018. I was employee number 43. When we IPO'd last year, my stock options were worth $4.2 million after taxes. I used part of that to buy this house from the trust. You signed the paperwork, Dennis. You just didn't read it carefully. I'd actually made the paperwork intentionally dense, working with my attorney to embed the purchase agreement within what looked like routine trust administration documents. Dennis had signed everything his lawyer put in front of him without questions, assuming it was standard maintenance of the trust. He deposited the $2.8 million check into the trust account, distributed the funds according to the trust terms, which gave him a management fee, and distributed the remainder to various family members, including me, and never once realized he'd sold the property to his niece. You tricked me, he said. I provided legal documents which you signed without reading. That's not a trick, that's you being careless. Amber backed away from the boxes. I'm not getting involved in family drama. Dennis, you said this place was available. It is available, Patricia insisted. Maya, you can't just buy the family beach house out from under everyone. Your parents wanted this property to stay in the family. I am family, and I bought it fair and market value, from the trust, with Dennis's full knowledge and consent. The trust documents explicitly allowed the trustee to sell property with or without beneficiary approval. Dennis used that authority to sell to me. A black Mercedes SUV pulled up the street, exactly on time. I'd called Christina Wang, my real estate agent, 3 hours ago when Jordan first texted me that something was happening at the beach house. Christina had sold me the property originally and handled several other investments for me. She stepped out wearing a crisp blazer and carrying a leather portfolio. At 52, Christina was one of the top luxury real estate agents in the county. She'd closed over $200 million in sales last year. Good afternoon, she said pleasantly, walking up to our group. I'm Christina Wang with Pacific Crown Realty. I'm here to confirm property details for my client, Maya Anderson. She turned to Dennis. You must be Mr. Davis. We need to discuss your current occupation of a private residence. Dennis looked baffled. What are you talking about? Christina opened her portfolio and pulled out documents. According to county records and the title insurance policy, this property at 847 Ocean View Drive is owned solely by Maya Christine Anderson. Purchase date November 12, 2023. Current assessed value $4.7 million. There are no liens, no encumbrances, and no other parties with ownership interest. She looked at the furniture being moved in. Are you moving into this property, Mr. Davis? I have permission. From whom? I'm the trustee of a trust that no longer exists. The trust was dissolved upon the sale of its primary asset, this property, to Miss Anderson. You signed the dissolution paperwork in December 2023. Christina pulled out another document. This is a certified copy of that dissolution, filed with the county clerk. Your signature is on page 6. Patricia grabbed the document, flipping through pages. Her face went pale as she found Dennis's signature. You sold the beach house, she said. Our beach house. I didn't. I thought it was just routine paperwork. The lawyer said it was standard trust administration. Your lawyer was correct, Christina said. The trust documents gave you authority to sell property to meet trust obligations and distribute assets. You exercised that authority. Miss Anderson was the buyer. The transaction was completely legal. Amber was already pulling boxes back out of the house. I'm leaving. You told me we'd have a beach house for the summer, Dennis. You said it was all arranged. It was. I thought. You thought you could just take your niece's house. Amber shook her head. This is crazy. I'm not getting involved in whatever this is. She stormed to a white BMW parked down the street, got in and drove away. Dennis watched her go, his face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Christina continued. unfazed. Mr. Davis, you are currently in unlawful possession of private property. I recommend you remove all items you've brought here, and return any keys you have to Miss Anderson. Otherwise, she would be within her rights to call local law enforcement and report a trespassing situation. Now wait just a minute, Patricia said. Maya, this is family property. Your parents bought this place intending it for the whole family to use. You can't just kick Dennis out. He was never invited in, I said quietly. After everything we did for you. Patricia's voice rose. We took you in when you had nobody. We gave you a home, raised you like our own daughter. And this is how you repay us. By stealing the family beach house. I bought the family beach house for $2.8 million, which was distributed to trust beneficiaries including you. You received $340,000 from that sale, Patricia. It's sitting in your savings account right now. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The money had appeared in her account 14 months ago. Dennis had told her it was from trust investments doing well. She'd used $40,000 of it to remodel their kitchen and put the rest in savings for retirement. That money came from selling the beach house, she said weakly. Yes, the trust owned the house. I bought it from the trust. The proceeds were distributed according to trust terms. You got your share, so did Dennis's brother Michael, so did your kids. I also received a distribution, which gave me back about $600,000 of what I'd paid. Everyone benefited financially. But the house itself is mine. I own it. I pay the property taxes. I pay the insurance. I pay for maintenance and upkeep. It's my house. Dennis finally found his voice. This is ungrateful, Maya. After we raised you, you should be offering us use of the house, not throwing us out. You raised me because you were paid to, I said, finally letting the truth out. The trust paid you $2,000 a month in guardian fees. You got $24,000 a year for 18 years. That's $432,000, not counting the clothing allowance, education stipend, and medical expenses the trust covered. You were compensated very well for raising me. Patricia's face went red. That money barely covered costs. It covered costs perfectly. I've reviewed the trust accounting. Every expense was documented. The trust paid for my food, clothes, school expenses, medical bills, and extracurriculars. You weren't doing charity work, Patricia. You were doing a job, and you were paid market rate for it. How dare you, she whispered. How dare I what? Point out facts. I'm grateful you provided a home for me after my parents died, truly. But you've held that over my head my entire life, acting like I owe you something beyond basic human decency. You've used my parents' death as leverage to make me feel obligated to you. Dennis stepped forward, anger replacing his confusion. You little careful, Christina interrupted smoothly. We're on private property, and this conversation is being recorded. She gestured to a small camera on her lapel. I record all property disputes for liability purposes. Whatever you say next should be something you're comfortable having played in court. Dennis froze. Now, Christina continued, I'm going to give you both a choice. You can remove all items you brought here today, return the keys to Miss Anderson, and leave peacefully. Or we can call the police and handle this formally. What would you prefer? Patricia looked at me with pure hatred. You've become a cruel person, Maya. I don't know what happened to the sweet girl we raised, but she's gone. The sweet girl you raised learned to stand up for herself, I said. That's what happened. They chose to leave peacefully. It took 40 minutes to load everything back into Dennis's truck, the furniture, the boxes, the groceries. I stood on the porch with Christina, watching them work in silence. When they were done, Dennis walked up to me and dropped the keys on the porch railing. You're not family anymore, he said. You understand that. This ends whatever relationship we had. We haven't had a relationship in years, Dennis. We've had an obligation you kept reminding me of. I'm okay with it being over. Patricia was crying in the passenger seat of their car. Dennis got in beside her, and they drove away. Christina waited until they were out of sight before speaking. That was difficult. Are you all right? I'm fine. Family disputes over property are always the worst. She closed her portfolio. For what it's worth, you handled it well. You kept calm, you stuck to facts, and you didn't let them manipulate you emotionally. Thanks for coming. I knew Dennis wouldn't believe me alone. Having you here made it real. Happy to help. Now about the property. I have 3 potential renters interested in summer leases if you want to generate income, or we could list it for sale. The market is strong right now. I looked at the house, weathered and beautiful, standing where my parents had dreamed of retiring. I'd bought it back because selling it felt like losing the last piece of them. But standing here now, I realized the house wasn't them. My parents lived in my memories, my values, the work ethic they'd instilled before they died. I want to keep it, I said, but I want to use it differently. What if we set up a program for kids who lost parents, like a summer retreat, art programs, counseling, just a place to be kids without everyone treating them like they're broken? Christina smiled. That's a wonderful idea. It would need to be structured as a nonprofit for tax purposes, but it's definitely doable. I have contacts who specialize in that kind of thing. Let's explore it. I'll need time to set things up properly, but yeah, let's do that. After Christina left, I walked through the house alone. It smelled like salt air and cedar, exactly how I remembered from childhood visits. My parents had brought me here every summer. Dad would make pancakes in the tiny kitchen. Mom would paint on the back deck, capturing the ocean light on canvas. I found myself in the master bedroom, looking out at the Pacific. The sun was setting, turning the water gold and orange. My phone rang. Jordan, Maya, I just talked to my parents. Mom is hysterical. Dad won't speak to me. What happened? I told him everything. Jesus, he said when I finished. I knew Dad was having an affair. I didn't know he was dumb enough to move her into your house. You knew about Amber. I've known for 6 months. I tried to tell Mom, but she didn't want to hear it. She kept saying their marriage was fine, that I was imagining things. He paused. Are you really cutting them off? I'm setting boundaries. That's different. Not to them. It isn't. Dad's already called Michael, spinning this like you stole the beach house and humiliated him in front of his girlfriend. Uncle Michael was Dennis's younger brother, a podiatrist in San Diego. He'd gotten his share of the trust proceeds too. Let him spin it however he wants, I said. The truth is documented. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. They've guilt-tripped you long enough. Jordan hesitated. Can I ask you something? That money you made from your company going public, why didn't you tell anyone? Because money changes how people treat you. When I was struggling through college, working 3 jobs, barely making rent, nobody in the family offered to help. They said it would build character, but if they'd known I'd eventually have money, they would have been nicer. They would have treated me like I mattered. You always mattered, Maya. Not to them. To them I was an obligation, a burden they'd taken on out of duty. They reminded me constantly that I should be grateful, that they didn't have to keep me, that I was lucky they were good people. I felt tears building. Do you know what it's like to be told repeatedly that you're lucky someone loves you? Like love is a gift you didn't earn and don't deserve. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was that bad. It wasn't abuse. They fed me, clothed me, made sure I was safe, but there was always this distance, this reminder that I wasn't really theirs. And when I succeeded, when I did well in school, or got into Stanford or landed a good job, they acted like it was despite my circumstances, not because of their support. Jordan was quiet for a moment. They told people you got into Stanford on a sob story, that the admissions committee felt sorry for you because you were an orphan. Of course they did. You know that's not true, right? You got in because you had a 4.0 GPA, and perfect SAT scores. You earned it. I know, but it took me years to really believe that, to stop hearing their voices in my head telling me I was just lucky. We talked for another 20 minutes. Jordan promised to stay neutral with his parents, but made it clear he supported my decision. When we hung up, I felt lighter somehow. I spent the night at the beach house, sleeping in the guest room on an air mattress I kept in the garage. The sound of waves filled the darkness. I hadn't slept there since buying the property. It had felt too painful, too full of memories, but that night, I dreamed of my parents. Not sad dreams, but good ones. Dad teaching me to identify constellations. Mom showing me how to mix paint colors, to capture the ocean's exact shade. In the morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with texts. From Uncle Michael. Dennis told me what you did. Very disappointed in you, Maya. Family should come first. From my cousin Sarah, Michael's daughter. Heard about the beach house drama. Dad's pissed, but honestly it sounds like Uncle Dennis screwed up. You okay? From Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, who lived in Chicago. Your cousin told me what happened with Dennis and Patricia. I'm sorry they treated you that way. Your mom would be proud of you standing up for yourself. Call me if you need to talk. Aunt Linda had always been kind to me, but she lived far away, and had her own family. We exchanged Christmas cards and occasional phone calls, but weren't close. I called her back. Maya, I've been thinking about you all morning. Are you all right? I'm okay, honestly. What Dennis did was unconscionable. Moving his mistress into your house. And Patricia helped him. I'm furious just thinking about it. Did you know they'd been using my parents' death to guilt-trip me? Linda sighed. I suspected. The few times I visited, I noticed how they talked to you. There was always this edge, this reminder that you should be grateful. It bothered me, but I didn't feel like I had a right to interfere. I wish you had. Me too, honey. Me too. She paused. Your mom used to worry about what would happen if something happened to her and your dad. She didn't want you raised by Dennis. She thought he was entitled and lazy, but he was family, and the lawyer said keeping you with family was best. This was new information. Mom didn't want Dennis to raise me. She wanted me to, but I was dealing with my own health issues back then. The lupus was bad, and I had 2 little kids. I couldn't take on a 3rd child, especially one dealing with grief. I felt guilty about that for 20 years. Aunt Linda, you don't need to feel guilty. You were sick. You had your own kids to care for. I know, but still, if I'd known how Dennis and Patricia would treat you, I would have found a way. You deserved better. We talked for an hour. She told me stories about my mom I'd never heard, about their childhood, their relationship, my mom's dreams for me. It was healing in a way I didn't expect. Over the next 3 weeks, I didn't hear from Dennis or Patricia. Jordan kept me updated. They were telling people I'd stolen the beach house, that I was ungrateful and cruel, that I'd betrayed the family. Some relatives believed them. Others asked questions and got the real story. The family split predictably. Dennis's side mostly supported him. My mom's side mostly supported me. In the middle were people like Jordan and Sarah, who just wanted everyone to get along, but understood why that wasn't possible. I started working with Christina and a nonprofit attorney to set up the children's grief retreat. We'd offer it 2 weeks every summer, completely free, for kids ages 8 to 16, who'd lost parents. Art therapy, counseling, beach activities, just space to be kids with other kids who understood. The paperwork took months, but by April we had nonprofit status. By May we had 5 counselors, hired and a curriculum developed. By June we were accepting applications for our first summer session. 30 kids showed up that first year. They came from all over the state. Foster kids, kids living with grandparents, kids living with older siblings, barely old enough to be guardians themselves. They came sad and guarded, and unsure. They left a little lighter. Not healed. Grief doesn't work that way, but less alone. I volunteered that first session, helping with art projects and beach games. On the last day, a 10-year-old girl named Sophie hugged me and said, "Thank you for making a place where people understand." That made everything worth it. The confrontation with Dennis, the family drama, the ugly accusations, all of it was worth Sophie's hug. Uncle Dennis never apologized. 18 months after the beach house incident, he and Patricia divorced. Amber had left him after the confrontation, and Patricia had finally accepted what Jordan had been telling her about the affair. Dennis moved to Nevada, to work in his brother Michael's podiatry practice. Patricia sent me a brief email 2 years later. "I've been in therapy working through things. My therapist suggested I reach out to you. I'm sorry for how we treated you. I understand if you don't want a relationship, but I wanted you to know I recognize now that we were wrong." I appreciated the apology, though I didn't pursue rebuilding the relationship. Some damage goes too deep to fully repair, but I did respond thanking her for the acknowledgement. That felt like enough. Jordan and I stayed close. He brought his students to volunteer at the grief retreat every summer. Sarah visited occasionally. Aunt Linda came every year, and helped coordinate the art therapy program. The beach house became something better than a family property everyone fought over. It became a place where kids learned they weren't alone, where grief was acknowledged without becoming an identity, where summer meant possibility instead of pain. 5 years after that confrontation in the driveway, I stood on the back deck watching 30 kids play on the beach. The house had been renovated to accommodate programs, bigger kitchen, more bedrooms, art studio, therapy offices, but the bones were the same. The view was the same. The sound of waves was the same. Christina joined me on the deck, now serving on the retreat's board of directors. "You've built something special here," she said. "We've built something special," I corrected. "Fair enough." She smiled. "Did you ever imagine it would become this?" "No. When I bought it, I just wanted to keep a piece of my parents. I didn't know it would become something bigger." That's usually how it works. We think we're preserving the past, but we're actually building the future. I thought about my parents, about the life they'd planned in this house. They'd never gotten to retire here, never gotten to wake up to ocean views, and spend lazy mornings drinking coffee on the deck. But in a way, their dream had come true. Not for them, but through them. Their daughter had taken their dream and transformed it into something that helped dozens of kids every year. That felt like the right kind of legacy. My phone buzzed. A text from Jordan with a photo. He'd gotten engaged to his girlfriend of 3 years. The photo showed them on a beach in Oregon, her hand extended to show the ring. I texted back congratulations, and asked if they'd set a date. Next summer. And Maya, we want to have the reception at the beach house. Not the retreat, just a family thing with people who actually matter. You, Sarah, Aunt Linda, my college friends, real family. Would that be okay? I looked at the house, at the kids playing on the beach, at the future being built on the foundation of the past. That would be perfect. I texted back. And it would be, not the family I'd been born into, or the family that had raised me, but the family I'd chosen, and the family that had chosen me back. That was the family that mattered.